was his wish to keep the details of the litigation secret. The last thing he wanted was publicity, for the transcripts of the trial revealed many technicalities that would aid his competition in numerous ways. In the short run, the inventor succeeded in protecting important aspects of his wireless scheme. But in the long run, the testimony became an important source text for Fessenden, who now had a legal basis for fashioning a plethora of second-order patents. By the time of his death, Fessenden had compiled an astounding 500 patents, which was nearly as many as Tom Edison. Obviously, this work also aided Lowenstein, who became a wireless expert valuable to different members of the new crop of engineers who were rapidly emerging. 33. Wardenclyffe, 1902 to 1903. While the tower itself is very picturesque, it is the wonders hidden underneath it that excite the curiosity of the little hamlet. In the center of the base there is a wooden affair very much like the companionway on an ocean steamer. Carefully guarded, no one except Mr. Tesla's own men have been allowed as much as the briefest peep. Mr. Sheriff told an inquirer that the shaft entrance led to a small drainage passage built for the purpose of keeping the ground about the tower dry, but the villagers tell a different story. They declare that it leads to a well-like excavation as deep as the tower is high, with walls of mason work and a circular stairway leading to the bottom. From there, they say, the entire ground below has been honeycombed with subterranean tunnels that extend in all directions. They tell with awe how Mr. Tesla, on his weekly visits, spends as much time in the underground passages as he does on the tower or in the handsome laboratory where the power plant for the World Telegraph has been installed. New York Times. Just as Tesla had created a notebook for his experiments in Colorado, he also compiled a daily log of activities at Wardenclyffe. His records for 1902 reveal little activity for the first third of the year, except for the month of March. Extended note-taking really began again in May and continued uninterruptedly until July 1903. Each week Tesla watched the tower attain a new height as he experimented by measuring the capacitance of his apparatus and constructing a prototype planet to calculate his theory of current propagation through the Earth. On this sizable metal sphere, the inventor would transmit varying frequencies to measure the voltage, wavelength, and velocity of the transmitted energy, and also assess various nodal points, such as along the equator and at the pole opposite the point of generation. In February 1902, along with Stanford White, Tesla entertained Prince Henry of Prussia, who had come to New York to retrieve a royal yacht that had been built in America. The brother of Kaiser Wilhelm, it had been Prince Henry who had assisted in the performance of the inventor's famous experiments under Tesla's name in Berlin 6 years earlier. The yacht was being christened by Alice Roosevelt, daughter of the President. In June, out at Wardenclyffe, 2 grey-haired East Hampton pilgrims dropped in on their way to a spring retreat. Kate's eyes glowed as she broke off from Robert and Nikola to approach the tower and feel it with her own hands. A radiant warmth flowed through her being as she watched the lanky engineer converse with her husband. By September, the transmitter had reached its full elevation of 180 feet. Exhausted of funds, with still the dome to place on top, the inventor had no choice but to wind down activities and lay off most of the workers. Tesla had sold his last major asset, a $35,000 landholding, but even that could not keep the operation fully afloat. Nevertheless, with this new source of revenue, he procured enough funds to keep a skeleton crew, cover chefs and his own lodging, and pay for a chef from the Waldorf to come out at regular intervals. Tesla also took his time to photograph the interior operations of the entire plant. These pictures not only included reproductions of all his machinery, but also contained a representative sample of the myriad different types of radio tubes that the inventor had designed. They numbered nearly 1,000. The Port Jefferson Echo reported "War between Marconi and Tesla" in their headlines in 1902. According to the paper, the United States Marconi Company had purchased land west of Bridgehampton and was planning on constructing its own competing 185-foot tower with New York connections to Western Union. It should become the most important wireless center in the country. Whereas Marconi was going to send his signals through the air, the paper said, Tesla plans through his 500-foot deep shaft to send messages through the Earth as well. Though the hollow was 120 feet, the gist of the report was accurate. Having first sent an emissary, Marconi himself hired a horse and buggy one rainy morning to go out to Wardenclyffe to meet with Tesla and see the operation with his own eyes. Marconi's limitations became apparent in conversation, and this gave Tesla the courage to return to see Morgan. He had stayed out of Morgan's way for nearly a year, but now it was clear to the inventor that once his partner realized the work accomplished with so little funds at hand, he would reconsider his position and agree to resume investment. All the inventor had to do was change the man's mind. On September the 5th, Tesla wrote the financier to inform him that the foreign patents had been assigned to the company. This letter explained clearly that his wireless system ensured privacy and had the ability to create a virtually infinite number of separate channels that were dependent not only on particular combinations of differing frequencies, but also on their order of succession. In essence, the inventor had explained to Morgan the concepts inherent in such devices as the protected channels on cable TV, digital recording, and the wireless telephone scrambler. In the letter, Tesla explained that he was forced to increase the power of his apparatus because of bold appropriations of his equipment, Marconi's piracy, but his mea culpa also betrayed paranoid tendencies, even though he was attempting reconciliation. The only way to fully protect myself was to develop apparatus of such power as to enable me to control effectively the vibrations throughout the globe. Now, if I had received this necessity earlier, I would have gone to Niagara, and with the capital you have so generously advanced, I could have accomplished this easily. But, unfortunately, my plans were already made, and I could not change. I endeavored once to explain this to you, much to my sorrow, as I impressed you wrongly. Nothing remained then but to do the best I could under the circumstances. Morgan's response was utter astonishment. Tesla had not only reiterated the breach of contract, but he had also revealed a striking flaw in his plan. Whereas he would have to haul in continuing truckloads of coal to provide the energy required to fire up his transmitter on Long Island, if he had set up operations at Niagara, there would have been easy access to unlimited amounts of power, and thus the operation would have been considerably less expensive to initiate. Furthermore, there was a standing offer by Rankin and his associates to provide power at the falls for little or no cost, thereby reducing potential expenses even more. Nevertheless, Tesla incredibly informs Morgan that even on Long Island he could outdo the power of the giant cataract. By straining every part of my machinery to the utmost, Tesla wrote, I shall be able to reach a rate of energy delivery of 10 millions of horsepower. This production, he proclaimed, would be equal to more than twice that of the entire Falls of Niagara. Thus the waves generated by my transmitter will be the greatest spontaneous manifestation of energy on Earth, the strongest effect produced at a point diametrically opposite the transmitter, which in this instance is situated a few hundred miles off the western coast of Australia. Whether or not this statement was true, it was counterproductive to divulge this. Most likely Tesla is discussing the production of a single massive burst of electrical energy rather than a continuous, never-ending flow. In either case, having spent a year in the outbacks of Colorado, the bon vivant was not about to give up his lifestyle at the elegant Waldorf for another lonely excursion to the dreary location near Buffalo. Neurotically impelled, the inventor was stirred to impress the financial magnate when all Morgan wanted was to signal ocean liners and send Morse code to Europe. Later in the letter, the inventor did address this more modest task of broadcasting simple messages. Over transmission lines, dispatches from New York Telegraph and Cable could be delivered to Wardenclyffe, where they could then be distributed to Europe by means of wireless to a central receiving station. Since your departure, Mr. Morgan, I have had time to reflect on the importance and scope of your work, and I now see that you are no longer a man, but as a principle, and that every spark of your vitality must be preserved for the good of your fellow men. I have therefore given up the hope that you might aid me in establishing a manufacturing plant which would enable me to reap the fruit of my labors of many years. But some ideas, which I have not simply conceived but worked out, are of such great consequence that I honestly believe them to deserve your attention. I have no greater desire than to prove myself worthy of your confidence, and that to have had relations, however distant, with so great and noble a man as you, will ever be for me one of the most gratifying experiences and most highly prized recollections of my life. Yours most devotedly, N. Tesla. Perhaps it was the finale, or the inventor's rank, or maybe the realization of the value of the fundamental patents that continued to flow into his office. But for whatever reason, Morgan was moved to the point of allowing another meeting, as long as it was expressly understood that the liaison would still be kept unpublicized. Tesla's plan was to seek new investors by selling bonds and capitalizing the company at $10 million. What he did not realize was that his silent partner wanted to maintain his 51% control over the patents, take in about 1/3 of the securities, and also be reimbursed for his initial investment. In other words, whereas Tesla required about an additional $150,000 to complete the tower, pay off his debts, construct the receiving equipment, and so on, the Wall Street Hydra wanted his money back in full, wanted to maintain his large share of the concern, wanted the inventor to raise the funds on his own, and wanted no one to know of his connection to the project. If Tesla were to agree to all that, they would have a deal. Kate gazed out her window at the changing colors of the leaves as they went over the Thanksgiving menu with Agnes. "Do you think he'll come, Mama?" "Of course he will. He didn't last year." "Mr. Tesla was not himself," Catherine stated matter-of-factly. Sitting by a fizzling Edison light bulb, she penned an urgent notice and hired a special messenger to deliver it. Tesla was working on his list of prospective investors when a loud banging at his door interrupted him. "Sorry, sir, it is important." The inventor grabbed the letter and ripped it open. Thoughts of accident and death flashed through his brain as he reflected upon his relationship with the Johnsons and his inability to deal with them now. He wrote back, "Some day I will tell you just what I think of people who mark their letters important or send dispatches at night. You know I would travel 1,000 miles to have such a great treat as one of Mrs. Philippoff's dinners, but this Thanksgiving Day I have a great many hard nuts to crack, and I will pass it in quiet meditation. The rest of the holidays I propose to pass in the same good company. Never mind my absence in body. It is no consequence. I am with you in spirit. With love to all, and Agnes in particular, Nikola." With this painful letter, Tesla succeeded in transferring some of his anguish to his friends. Not only would he not attend the November holiday feast, he would also not partake of the Christmas festivities. Unable to escape himself or dig his way out of the deep hole he was in, he passed the time cranking out ways to enlist new investors. When Catherine realized the depth of the inventor's despair, she became alarmed. The emptiness at such an important occasion was almost too much to bear. "Agnes, please write Mr. Tesla once again and tell him that he may stop by at any time that he likes and for ever long he wants." "Don't you think he knows what he's doing?" Robert interrupted. "He needs to be by himself right now." "Don't tell me what he needs," Kate exploded, her Irish temper flaring. "Do it," she commanded her daughter. Robert moved quietly into the living room to read a book of poems. As Agnes sat down to write, a peculiar dark and twisted expression passed over her mother's face. Kate retired to her boudoir to sit there in her gloom. Tesla wrote, "My dear Agnes, back 2 days after the New Year. I have no time, but plenty of love and friendship for all of you. I would like very much to see you, but it is impossible. Even kings are beginning to infringe my patent rights, and I must restrain myself." Catherine could take solace in the fact that her platonic aficionado had used the word love twice in 2 letters. In his own peculiar way, he had transformed the pain of his career to their linkage, and in that sense he had reached out as never before. But it was by withdrawing, and this made her love him even more. Thomas Comerford Martin may have had mixed feelings about having supported so vigorously a man he knew had infringed on Tesla's patents, But Martin had warned Tesla nearly 5 years earlier that whereas Marconi was succeeding on the physical plane, Tesla appeared to advance mostly in theory. A social gadfly, Martin had also upped his prestige considerably by hosting the Gala Marconi affair, and he continued to elevate his standing among the upper echelon of the electrical community. Harper's decided to do a feature on him, and Edison was becoming amenable to the idea of allowing him to write his biography. As a precursor to the new venture, the editor prepared for the weekly a short piece on the volcanic lifetime of a master who has produced a patent every fortnight for over 30 years. An Edison man remains an Edison man to the end of the chapter, and is proud of the stamp left upon his career by the great spirit with whom trials and triumphs have been shared. Although Edison has always been surrounded by a willing host of workers, he has always held easily his leadership among them. This is by no means true of others. Some powerful thinkers, whether from instinctive distrust or unavowed jealousy, endeavor to hammer out their conceptions in lonely struggle, and names could be mentioned here of electrical inventors whose curse seems to be this sterile seclusion. In Edison's case, the sunny, kindly temperament of the man makes for friendship. Martin was almost certainly talking about Tesla here, and in so doing he highlighted ponderous debilities in the inventor's personality. Tesla could be inordinately withdrawn, private, distrustful, and elitist, and yet envious of others, unable to share in the development of his ideas lest he would have to share credit. Later in this article, Martin wrote that a great many first-class inventors are sharply concentrated along one line, while Edison had many irons in the fire. As versatile and incredibly prolific as Tesla was, he stuck until the end of his days to the single monumental Wardenclyffe idea, when any aspect of the grand plan, in and of itself, would have been a revolutionary accomplishment. Underneath it all, however, Martin was, without doubt, the one individual who had accomplished the most towards explicating the wondrous achievements of the sequestered genius, and his connections to Tesla would remain sacred to him for the duration of his life. Martin took the opportunity to let Tesla know this when he gave the inventor an updated version of the collected works. "Many thanks for the book," Tesla wrote his old-time friend. "It was a pleasure to read the dedication, which tells me that your heart is true to Nikola." This occasion served to break the ice again, and the two resumed their friendship, albeit not with the same intensity as before. In a dreadful predicament, the inventor was beginning to stare down a canyon of doom, writing his letters now in pencil, abandoning the certainty of the pen. "Ever since I was a boy, I was desirous of drawing on the Bank of England. Can you blame me? I confess my low commercial interests dominate me. Will you please give me a list of people almost as prominent and influential as the Johnsons, who desire to get into high society? I will send them my letter." Nikola busted. Forced to approach both the Johnsons and his manager George Scherf for funds, both lent him thousands over the next few years. Simultaneously, he returned to former enthusiasts such as Mrs. Dodge and Mrs. Winslow, and new investors such as Mrs. Schwartz, wife of toy store owner F.A.O. Schwartz. The price for investment was $175 for each share. With his back to the wall, he approached again his Wall Street benefactor. "Will you now let me go from door to door to humiliate myself to solicit funds from some Jew or promoter, and have him participate in that gratitude which I have for you?" he wrote Morgan. "I am tired of speaking to pusillanimous people who become scared when I ask them to invest $5,000 and get the diarrhea when I call for 10. Mad scientist. "It is a mighty fine tower," said one good farmer last week. "The breeze up there is something grand of a summer evening, and you can see the Sound and all the steamers that go by. We're tired, though, trying to figure out why he put it here instead of Coney Island." Although operations were suspended, there were many avenues the inventor would explore in his attempts to complete the vision. One of his first decisions was to comply with George Scherf's plan to become more pragmatic. Throughout the balance of the year and much of 1903, Tesla began to manufacture oscillators and continue development of his fluorescent lamps. Revenues began to trickle in, and by mid-year he had compiled enough savings to hire back a half-dozen workers and pay for the cupola, which was placed at the apex of the spire. Over 50 feet in diameter, 10 feet tall, and weighing 55 tons, this iron and steel crown, with specially designed multitude of nodal points, would serve the purpose storing electrical charges and distributing them either through the air or down the metal column and into the hollow. The cupola was linked to 4 large condensers behind the laboratory, which also served the purpose of storing electrical energy, and these in turn were coupled with an elaborate apparatus which had the ability to provide every imaginable regulation in the control of energy. At the base of the edifice, deep below the earth, along the descending spiral staircase, was a network of catacombs that extended out like spokes of a wheel. 16 of them contained iron pipes which protruded from the central shaft to a distance of 300 feet. The expense for these terrestrial grippers was notable, as Tesla had to design special machines to push the pipes one after the other deep into the Earth's interior. Also in the well were 4 stone-lined tunnels, each of which gradually rose back to the surface. Large enough for a man to crawl through, they emerged like isolated igloo-shaped brick ovens, 300 feet from the base of the tower. Although the exact reason for the burrows has not been determined, their necessity was probably multifaceted. Tesla had increased the length of the aerial by over 100 feet by extending the shaft into the earth. Simultaneously, he was able to more easily transmit energy through the ground with this arrangement. It's quite possible that he also planned to resonate the aquifer, which was situated slightly below the bottom of the well. The insulated passageways, which climbed back to the surface, may have been safety valves, which would have allowed excess pressure to escape. They also provided an alternative way to access the base. Tesla may have planned to fill other shafts with salt water or liquid nitrogen to augment transmission. There may have also been other reasons for their construction. Just as the inventor prepared to test his new equipment, creditors began to encroach more vigorously, and Tesla was never able to put the final fireproof protective outer facing on the cupola and tower. To Westinghouse he owed nearly $30,000. The phone company was billing him for the telephone poles and lines which they had erected to connect him with civilization, and James Warden was suing for taxes owed on the land. With the exigency of time inexorably pressing down, the inventor worked furiously to link his transmitter to the power source and test its potentialities. Throughout the early part of 1903, the engineer performed many measurements of ground resistance and insulation resistance of the tower. He even considered temperature increases caused by ground losses, differences when salty water was spread round the base, weather conditions, and time of day. In the last week of July, just days before men came to cart away part of his equipment, the inventor fashioned a way to couple his behemoth and fire it up. As pressures reached their maximum with the cupola fully charged, a dull thunder rumbled from the site, alerting the hamlet that something was about to happen. Strange light at Tesla's tower. From the top of Mr. Tesla's latticework tower on the north shore of Long Island, there was a vivid display of light several nights last week. This phenomena provoked the curiosity of the few people who lived nearby, but the proprietor of the Wardenclyffe plant declined to explain the spectacle when inquiries were addressed to him. Tesla's mushroom-shaped citadel spewed forth a pyrotechnic eruption that could be gleaned not only by those who lived nearby, but also by the populace inhabiting the shores of Connecticut across Long Island Sound. By the end of July, the tower fell silent, never to raise its radio cry again. It was a foggy morning when the Westinghouse crew appeared with their horse-drawn wagon and court order granting them permission to cart away the heavier equipment. The gargantuan edifice loomed as a spectre of what could be, its head still obscured by the low-hanging clouds. Except for a guard, George Sheriff, and a handyman, the entire crew was let go. His dream now hobbled, the sullen wizard crept back to the city to weep alone in his walled-off suite. 34. The Web, 1903 to 1904.
July 14th, 1903. Dear Sir, I have received your letter, and in reply would say that I should not feel disposed at present to make any further advances. Yours truly, J. Pierpont Morgan.
Mr. Bolt removed his monocle from his top vest pocket and eyed the man suspiciously. The foreigner was sweating profusely from the August heat.
Nikola Tesla,
he said in a heavy accent as he handed the hotel manager a crinkled envelope. Momentarily sidetracked by a spot of dust, Bolt retrieved the document to inspect Tesla's letterhead.
You may go up,
he said disdainfully as he slammed his hand down on the clanger to call a bellhop. The man entered what appeared to him to be a palatial suite.
Jovan, so good of you to come,
the venerated engineer said in his native tongue.
You must find Uncle Peter. It is a matter of utmost urgency. He may be in Bosnia. Then go there.
Tesla handed the man a round-trip boat ticket, a communique sealed with wax, and a billfold of spending money.
I am depending on you.
Tesla's three sisters, Angelina Tebayevich, Milka Glumicic, and Morica Kozanovic, their husbands, all Serbian priests, and all of their children, sat in the rectory to listen to the spellbinding account the courier brought of Niko's laboratory and world telegraphy tower.
Its head reaches up to the clouds, Jovan said, spreading his arms to their full extent, and some day it will send messages to the whole world, right here to this town.
Jovan's cousins gasped in amazement as he passed around a photograph taken just 3 months earlier by Dickinson D. Alley, the photographer also responsible for the Colorado pictures.
How will we know when a message is sent?
Everyone will have a little device the size of... Jovan looked around the room and spotted a prayer book.
The size of this book, with a wire attached, which you will stick into the ground to receive the message.
Two first cousins, Nicholas Tebayevich and Sava Kozanovich, both just emerging from boyhood, listened intently. Fully captivated by such news from America, Nicholas announced proudly, "Someday I will be an inventor too." Sava, destined 40 years later to be Yugoslavia's first ambassador to America, smiled back and nodded in agreement. Uncle Peter stepped from the room to open the dispatch in private. Niko had told his uncle that the panic had hit him hard, that he was out of funds. He would have to close down the World Telegraphy Center if assistance was not received immediately. He asked Peter to go to a local bank and borrow funds using shares in Wardenclyffe as collateral. The bank, of course, would not comply, so Peter called a meeting with family elders for a pooling of resources. They then returned to Belgrade, where the transfer of funds could be accomplished.
"You wish Niko well for us,"
Peter said, grasping Jovan with both arms. Tesla received the money by the end of the month, but it was really only enough to keep a door open for the balance of the year. September the 13th, 1903. Dear Mr. Morgan, many years I was at your door with this invention, but I did not go in thinking it would be useless. My last undertaking has returned more than 24 times the original investment, and this in strong hands should do better still. Help me to complete this work, and you will see. Yours most faithfully, M. Tesla. Altering his schedule, the inventor began visiting the lab only on weekends. Having thought the matter through, he abandoned the idea of meeting with small-time investors and placed his efforts in 2 separate directions. He would step up the manufacture of the oscillators and enlist other tycoons. With the money from his relatives, Tesla was able to hire back a few workers. Operations, however, were just about nil, and the rest of the crew were angry about not being paid. "You know, of course," he told Sheriff, "that when this panic came, a great many manufacturers simply dismissed their men. Our employees should understand that I have tried to treat them generously in the hardest times this country has known, and they should be grateful instead of impatient. Although the panic is practically over, there is still a general feeling of apprehension on the street. However, I have a few irons in the fire, and at any moment I may come up with the solution which confronts me. I am more than ever assured that nothing can prevent my ultimate success." Tesla's first stop was the home of John Jacob Astor. Taking with him Ali's new dramatic glasses, the inventor tried his best to reignite the flame. Astor, who was earning approximately $3 million per annum, was nevertheless not a frivolous man. Most of his money these days was being spent on his yacht, the Norma Hull. Whereas Tesla had had an ally in Astor's wife, the marriage was now in decline, with Ava spending most of her time in Europe with her 2 small children, and her husband Jack continuing his practice of straying at home.
"While wishing you all possible luck," Astor wrote the inventor, "do not care to go into the company myself."
Deciding that there were other fish in the sea worth hooking, Tesla compiled a list of the biggest ones and worked with a graphic designer to produce a flashy mailer. Known as the Tesla Manifesto, the pamphlet boldly announced the expectations of his world telegraphy enterprise. Folded into a maroon vellum binder, the brochure contained lavish prints of the Colorado station, and also the imposing laboratory and tower at Wardenclyffe, a list of relevant patents, past and future accomplishments, a statement of his availability to be hired as a consultant, and a declaration of the breadth and scope of his plan. All of this surrounded by a scalloped design of pen and ink drawings of his many other inventions. Atop the new magnifying transmitter, drawn as part of the frame in fancy cursive, were the following words: "Electrical oscillator activity, 10 million horsepower." People on his list included numerous moguls, each worth anywhere between $20 and $200 million, just about all personally known by the inventor. "Luca," Tesla wrote to Robert Johnson, "Rockefeller and Harriman are now taking up every moment of my time, but I think I shall get through with them very shortly." Written partly in jest, this letter was not far from the truth, for Tesla was becoming more successful in penetrating a number of other wealthy enclaves. An interview with Wizard Edison. "Do you believe, Mr. Edison, with Tesla, that we should be able to talk around the world one of these days?"
"No, I do not look for developments in that line. The wonderful thing that will be more and more developed is wireless telegraphy. Marconi is all right and is bound sooner or later to perfect his system."
With Edison leading the charges against his credibility, Tesla was placed in a delicate situation. The public at large had yet to know of the Morgan connection, and yet Tesla had to inform potential investors of his interest. Due to animosities that Morgan still held for Harriman, a contract with him was out of the question, but there were still many other financiers to consider. On October the 12th, 1903, Tesla met with Thomas Fortune Ryan, a stalwart, corpulent man 5 years Tesla's senior. Ryan, whose real middle name was Faulkner, had gotten his start as a dry goods clerk in Baltimore. His break came after he moved to Wall Street, where he became a stockbroker and investor in large financial institutions. By 1905, his position had grown so extensively that he gained control of nearly $1.4 billion, which was equivalent to almost half of the entire public debt of the United States. Almost 1/3 of this figure stemmed from his acquisition of the controlling shares of Equitable Life Assurance Society, and this came about a little over a year after his initial meeting with Tesla. In and of itself, the connection would appear to be incidental. However, it was Tesla who arranged for a meeting between Ryan and Morgan in attempts to iron out an amenable agreement, and it's well known that Morgan was the secret power behind the famous Equitable Life Insurance scandal which erupted in 1905. Aside from the handful of diamonds he perpetually fondled in his palm, Ryan's other assets included control over Mutual Life and Washington Life Insurance, New York City Railway, American Tobacco, Morton Trust, Metropolitan Securities, and Mercantile Trust. Ryan also sat on the board of a dozen other insurance, banking, rail, and utility concerns. He also owned an immense estate covering hundreds of acres north of the city near Monticello, where he had erected a $500,000 mansion. From this retreat, his wife, Mrs. T.F. Ryan, made a name for herself as a philanthropist, founding a theological institution, erecting a magnificent Catholic church and a public hospital, purchasing fire company equipment, and making scores of minor contributions for the good of the village. Known for his striking proficiency of systematic organization, decisive action, secrecy and the art of using great power behind the throne, Ryan's most effective gift was his persuasive ability. Mr. Ryan makes his headquarters in the Morton Trust Company's office, where he is vice president. He does not bar the door like John D. Rockefeller. Any caller gets to his secretary, and very often to the inner room. There is none of the gruffness that so characterizes Mr. Morgan. Mr. Ryan is suavely silent. He never does and never says an important thing without consulting lawyers. Yet he always is polite and never shows anger. Tesla had calculated that he required approximately $100,000 to complete his project, so his plan was to enlist 10 subscribers at $10,000 each. "What is the use of going to so many people?" Ryan suggested, staring at the contents of the vellum binder. "I shall take 1/4. Where do I sign?" Obviously, this was a great opportunity, but it was not a simple matter of just signing a paper. Tesla had to go back to Morgan to confer, and $25,000 would still leave him way short of his goal. "Would you consider underwriting the entire $100,000? "That's a possibility." "Let me speak to my partner about your generous offer and get back to you." "Is it anyone that I know?" Ryan inquired. "I am under orders to keep his name confidential." "We are talking about a significant amount of money, Mr. Tesla. I want to know who I'm going into business with." "It is Pierpont Morgan," the inventor said cryptically. "Morgan? Well, then, you couldn't be in better hands." Tesla wrote Morgan on the following day to arrange a meeting. "Mr. Ryan is a great admirer and a loyal friend of yours, and for this reason, as well as on account of his ability, I am very anxious to enlist his cooperation. I have told him that $100,000 would be sufficient to reach the first commercial results, which will pave the way to other great successes. Knowing your generous spirit, I have told Mr. Ryan that any terms you may decide upon will be satisfactory to me." For Thanksgiving, Tesla joined the Johnsons. He had good news to report. Just back from a 2-month stint in Europe, Robert and Kate were eager to describe their meeting with Queen Eleanor of Italy. Having been decorated by King Humbert in 1895 for his work on the international copyright, Robert was received by the widowed Queen as a distinguished personage. He read to her and the Queen Mother a selection from his most recent book of poems. They also stayed a few extra weeks to witness the Jubilee at the Vatican, celebrating 25 years of the reign of Pope Leo XIII. "Mr. Tesla, do I detect a gleam in your eye?" Kate inquired. "You're not about to become one of the detested wealthy elite, are you?" Robert teased. "My dear Luca, I do not want you to despise millionaires, as I am hard at work to become one. My stocks have gone up considerably this week." "Morgan?" Catherine whispered hopefully. "Fortune Ryan," Tesla said, taking out a banknote to display proudly. He would receive a total of $10,000 from the financier. "If it continues for a few weeks like this, the globe will be girdled soon. Now, Kate, where's that turkey?" At this time, Morgan met with Ryan. Obviously, the Tesla deal did not go through. The question is why. Every indication suggests that the meeting went well. Ryan had been described by Wheeler, one of Morgan's harshest critics, as a most adroit, suave, and noiseless man. And this makes some sense, for a few years later it would become evident that Ryan was in essence a Morgan puppet. In 1899, Henry Hyde passed away. He had been controller of the $500 million Equitable Life Assurance Society, comprising the scrapings of the poor. 51% of the company was left to his son James, who was 23 at the time. A rather eccentric and naive millionaire, James charged the company for petty extravagances, such as importing barbers from France and placing his personal chefs at all of his favorite restaurants. The muckrakers were unable to tolerate the extravagant lifestyle of James, especially after it was learned that on January the 31st, 1905, he had spent $200,000 on a Louis XV costume ball at Sherry's. They demanded his resignation. No doubt, ever since Hyde's father had passed on, Morgan had had his eye on the company, but because of the Northern Pacific debacle, he had to proceed cautiously. It is plausible to consider that at the meeting concerning the Tesla project, Morgan might have suggested that Ryan's money could be better spent in a different area. Whatever he said, it appears to have been stated in such a way as to not completely turn off Ryan, as he did invest and maintain an interest in the enterprise from the years 1903 to 1906, although he never paid Tesla more than the initial modest subscription. In a situation that paralleled the Northern Pacific fiasco, Morgan fought for the Equitable on one side against Harriman and his broker Jacob Schiff, another financier who almost went into the Tesla deal. The end result was an obscure maneuver whereby Thomas Fortune Ryan was able to purchase the controlling shares of Equitable for a paltry $2.5 million. Young Hyde moved to France, where he remained for a quarter-century. Rumours of mismanagement of the funds of a few million investors continued, however, and Ryan's picture throughout the summer of 1905 was slapped on the front pages of every newspaper in town. Drawn as a rapacious spider in his web, clutching his prey of the Equitable in one political cartoon, Ryan was described by Southern banker and critic John Skelton Williams in a scathing article that appeared in the World. Mr. Ryan has the tendencies which, if his lines had been cast in a humble and contracted sphere, probably would have made him a kleptomaniac. His strongest impulse is to acquire money, and his one robust passion is to keep it. Ryan is simply an acquiring machine and operates himself for the purpose of getting what others have. Although Morgan, as head of a rival insurance company, supposedly had no interest in Equitable, Herbert Satterley, his son-in-law, uncharacteristically revealed that Ryan was actually controlled by Morgan, stating that Morgan was entirely conversant with Mr. Ryan's plans. They had his thorough approval and possibly his financial backing. During the government investigations that continued relentlessly throughout the first decade of this century, it was discovered that dummy loans totaling $1.8 million were made to a 15-year-old Negro messenger boy in Morgan's New York Life Insurance Company. Ryan also sold his 51% interest in Equitable to Morgan for $3 million in 1910. Testimony from the investigation explains quite clearly Ryan's role as a Morgan puppet. Question. Untermeyer. Did Mr. Ryan offer this stock to you? Answer. Morgan. I asked him to sell it to me. Question. Untermeyer. Did you tell him why you wanted it? Answer. Morgan. No. I told him it was a good thing for me to have. He hesitated about it and finally sold it. Taken from Wheeler's Pierpont Morgan, Anatomy of a Myth, the author ended the passage as follows. During the Panic of 1907, Morgan, in his 71st year, truly manipulated vast sums and groups of men, including President Theodore Roosevelt, in commanding fashion. As the power behind the throne, clearly Morgan dominated the conversation when Ryan came to invest in Wardenclyffe. Morgan redirected his new chess piece into the insurance arena, but this still doesn't answer the question as to why. If Tesla's enterprise were perceived to have become potentially profitable, having Ryan put in another $100,000 to complete it would have been an easy thing to do. We can therefore conclude that Morgan deliberately scuttled the Tesla venture. The Guggenheim Connection. Aside from being annoyed with the difficult inventor, Morgan was concerned about Tesla's suggestion that he could transmit unlimited power by means of wireless. Tesla was boasting here, since he assured Morgan in future letters that Wardenclyffe would only be able to transmit feeble amounts of energy. We come to a juncture here where the decisions of individuals redirected the course of history. As John Stuart Mill has noted, individuals make the history, and here is a clear instance of this proposition. For all intents and purposes, Morgan made the decision in October 1903 to do his best to ensure the inventor's defeat. Morgan, however, was opposed philosophically to Tesla's overall scheme. It has been suggested that Morgan felt pressure from other Wall Street moguls, such as Bernard Baruch, Thomas Fortune Ryan's young and highly successful stockbroker. One day, Baruch had mistakenly suggested that Morgan, like him, was a gambler. Morgan was reported to reply, "I never gamble," and indeed may have backed down from the Tesla deal for fear of taking a chance that the controversial inventor might fail or that he might succeed in a way detrimental to existing corporate structures. The following quotation is from physician and inventor Andrija Henry Puharic, a man of Yugoslavian heritage who was tangentially involved in helping ship Tesla's papers to the Tesla Museum in Belgrade in the early 1950s, and who personally knew John O'Neill, Tesla's first major biographer. Now I, Puharic, always got this second-hand. You won't find it anywhere in print, but Jack O'Neill gave me this information as the official biographer of Nikola Tesla. He said that Bernard Baruch told J.P. Morgan, "Look, this guy is going crazy. What he's doing is he wants to give free electrical power to everybody, and we can't put meters on that. We are just going to go broke supporting this guy." And suddenly, overnight, Tesla's support was cut off. The work was never finished. From a technical and economic point of view, Morgan could not understand how free information and/or power could yield returns. And whether it was Baruch or not who warned Morgan, Tesla himself had voiced the opinion boldly, a decade earlier in the Sunday World, that by providing a reservoir of electrical energy throughout the earth through his apparatus, all monopolies that depend on conventional means of energy distribution, that is, through wires, will come to a sudden end. As the ultimate capitalist, Morgan's existence was greatly defined by controlling the price and distribution of energy and maintaining a working class to support the giant corporate monopolies called public utilities. Thus, he simply could not support a system where wireless information and power could be tapped by anyone with a receiving instrument, and machines would replace the workforce. Reorganizing existing power, lighting, and telephone industries to please the vision of a somewhat eccentric inventor was certainly an unlikely undertaking for the cautious Wall Street financier. All those businesses who would no longer need loans would then no longer deposit their profits in his bank. Tesla, as the quintessential iconoclast, had struck a bargain with the wrong king. In 1903, Bernard Baruch, just 33 years old and one of the wealthiest men on Wall Street, retired from the firm he had worked for over a decade to set up his own office. One of his first major clients were the Guggenheim brothers. Their interest lay in metals, so Baruch met with the miners Darius Ogden Mills and John Hayes Hammond Sr. to seek advice and gain investments. Mills suggested that Baruch go west and purchase mines himself, and Hammond was hired by the Guggenheims to act as an advisor and acquire silver mines in Mexico. One of Baruch's first acquisitions was the Utah Copper Company, for he knew there would always be a need for copper in the world. Tesla's wireless enterprise clearly threatened the Baruch Guggenheim investment that Morgan was trying to involve himself in. By 1905, the Utah Copper Company was producing copper and other metals at a rate in excess of $100 million per year, and this was a pace which maintained itself for another 25 years. In later years, John Hayes Hammond would claim that the development of the electrical and automotive industries were possible only with assured large supply of copper. Unfortunately for Tesla, his ultimate world plan was perceived as a threat on quite a number of key fronts. Tesla waited through the first weeks of December for a positive sign from the meeting between Ryan and Morgan, but none came. With no choice left, he was forced to confront the financial potentate eyeball to eyeball. He decided to take a pragmatic approach. "Will you permit me to call this or any other evening?" Tesla wrote. "I wish to bring a small instrument along to show you one or two experiments with my daylight. The shark who will come after me will get the contract for lighting your home." Timing his visit to coincide with the holiday, Tesla purposefully chose this opportune occasion to try and pierce the financier's stalwart exterior. But at the same time, he used the symbol of the shark in his letter, as this was an animal which ate big fish. Anne Morgan was one of his allies. She met him at the door. Having recently become a founder of the Colony Club, the first American Ladies' Society, patterned after a British gentleman's club and designed by Stanford White, Anne had entered into the midst of an androgynous theatre crowd with ties to the infamous homosexual author Oscar Wilde. With Tesla's sexual orientation perpetually an enigma, and Anne about to dabble in a lesbian fling, their bond transcended the surface amenities. Before meeting with her father, Anne was able to corral the avowed celibate and discuss with him the emerging view of the new women. "Mr. Tesla, I believe that it is absurd that in this day of enlightenment women do not yet have the right to vote." "I concur wholeheartedly, Anne. I also believe that this struggle of the human female towards sex equality will end up in a new sex order, with females superior." "Indeed?" Anne responded, the pupils of her eyes widening into large black pools. "I would have considered the sexes equal," she said, as her hand reached out to touch the inventor. "The modern woman who anticipates in merely superficial phenomenon the advancement of her sex is but a surface symptom of something deeper and more potent fomenting in the bosom of the race. It is not in the shallow physical imitation of men that women will assert first their equality and later their superiority, but in the awakening of the intellect of women. As generations ensue, the average woman will be as well educated as the average man, and then better educated, for the dormant faculties of her brain will be stimulated into an activity that will be all the more intense because of centuries of repose." "Mr. Morgan will see you now," the butler interrupted.
"Mr. Tesla."
Mr. Morgan, thank you for seeing me. My enemies have been so successful in representing me as a poet and visionary that it is absolutely imperative for me to put out something commercial without delay. If you will only help me to do this, you will preserve a property of immense value."
"I am sorry, Mr. Tesla. As I said before—"
"Won't you enable me to complete the work and show you that you have not made a mistake in giving me a checkbook to draw on your honored house? If you will imagine that I have found the stone of the philosophers, you will not be far from the truth. My invention will cause a revolution so great that almost all values and all human relations will be profoundly modified."
"Had you simply achieved what I had asked, you would not be in this predicament."
"Mr. Morgan, I beg to call again to your attention that my patents control absolutely all essential features, and that my work is in such a shape that whenever you tell me to go ahead, I shall girdle the globe in 3 months as surely as my name is Tesla. I have promised to the St. Louis people to open the door of the exposition with power transmitted from here. It is a great opportunity, Mr. Morgan. I can easily do it, but if you do not aid me soon, it will be too late. Please think for a moment what this means for me. What I have told you long ago has happened. My competitors have collapsed, since their wholesale attempts at practicable wireless transmission has not succeeded. Now is the time to aid me. You know this better than anyone else."
"I have done my part. There are many other businessmen out there with the capital to complete your project."
"But you, sir, are the controlling partner. Should I obtain a commitment from another, will you consider a renegotiation?"
"I will think it over."
Having met with Morgan in December, Tesla not only came away empty-handed, he also came away with the distinct feeling that his partner was not going to facilitate finding new investors. Avoiding Catherine at Christmas time was one way to telegraph the bad news. Using a full range of her feminine charms, the coquettish Mrs. Philipov issued one more of her provocative missives. December 20th, 1903. Dear Mr. Tesla, you are most unkind, dear friend. Why do you not come to see me, instead of always dropping into the Century to see Robert? I must have done something to offend you, but what? How can you be indifferent to such devotion? If you are unhappy and disappointed and down on your luck, then all the more reason why you should seek the companionship and support of your loyal friends. Indeed, if the whole world were against you, the more firmly would they cling to you. Faithfully yours, Catherine Johnson. Aware of Morgan's trepidation concerning the potential for his equipment to usurp the need for existing electrical power companies, the inventor wrote explicitly in attempts to allay these fears. January the 13th, 1904. Dear Mr. Morgan, the Canadian Niagara Company will agree in writing to furnish me 10,000 horsepower for 20 years without charge, if I put a plant there to transmit this power without wires to other parts of the world. As I outlined earlier, I would use the energy not for industrial purposes, but for operating clocks, stock tickers, and other apparatus which there are millions now in use, requiring on average not more than 1/10 of the HP for each instrument. Will you help me on any terms you choose and enable me to ensure and develop a great property which will ultimately yield 100-fold returns? Please do not do me an injustice in believing me incapable simply because a certain sum of money was not sufficient to carry out my undertaking. You may see that my work remains uncompleted because of a lack of funds, but you will never see that machinery which I construct does not fulfill the purposes for which it was designed. Tesla ended the letter with hearty wishes for the new year. How could he know that Morgan did not doubt that Tesla could succeed? He feared it. January the 13th, 1904. My dear Sir, in reply to your note, I regret to say that I should not be willing to advance any further amounts of money, as I have already told you. Of course, I wish you every success in your undertaking. Yours truly, J. Pierpont Morgan. Close to making deals with other investors, but hampered by his relationship to Morgan, Tesla was particularly upset that his partner replied on the same day his own letter was sent. Surmising that Morgan was not even considering the situation, Tesla became enraged. For the first time, he dropped all pretense and told Morgan what he really thought of him. January 14th, 1904. Dear Mr. Morgan, you wish me success? It is in your hands. How can you wish it? We start on a proposition, everything duly calculated. It is financially frail. You engage in impossible operations. You make me pay double, yes, make me wait 10 months for machinery. On top of that, you produce a panic. When, after putting in all I could scrape together, I come to show you that I have done the best that could be done, you fire me out like an office boy and roar so that you are heard 6 blocks away. Not a cent. It is spread all over town. I am discredited, the laughing-stock of my enemies. It is just 14 months that the construction work on my plant was stopped. 3 months more, with a good force of men, would have completed it, and now it would be paying $10,000 a day. More than this, I would have secured contracts from governments for a number of similar plants. Now, when I have practically removed all obstacles skillfully put in my way, and need only a little more to save a great property which would pay you $10 million as surely as 1 cent, you refuse to help in a trouble brought on by your own doings. Tesla suggests in the balance of the letter that a subscription of $25,000 would enable him to start up operations of the production of oscillators and the fluorescent light, and that eventually, in a slow and painful way, he would be able to obtain the necessary funds to complete the tower. I am anxious to succeed on your account as mine. What a dreadful thing it would be to have the papers come with your name in red letters, "A Morgan deal defaults." It would be telegraphed all over the globe. You may not care for it, Mr. Morgan. Men are like flies to you. But I would have to work 5 years to repair the damage, if repairable at all. I have told you all. Please do not write to refuse. I am pained enough as it is. Yours sorrowfully, N. Tesla. Having received no response, Tesla shot off another letter the following week. January 22nd, 1904. Are you going to leave me in a hole? I have made 1,000 powerful enemies on your account because I have told them that I value one of your shoestrings more than all of them. In 100 years from now, this country would give much for the first honors of transmitting power without wires. It must be done by my methods and apparatus, and I should be aided to do it first myself. April the 1st, 1904. Will you aid me to complete this great work? April the 2nd, 1904. Have you ever read the Book of Job? If you will put my mind in place of his body, you will find my sufferings accurately described. I have put all the money I could scrape together in this plant. With $50,000 more, it is completed, and I have an immortal crown and an immense fortune. Unable to understand why the Ryan deal went sour, Tesla nevertheless deduced that it had been Morgan's doing. Retaliating in any overt way would have been suicide. And although Tesla had self-destructive tendencies, breaching a contract with J. Pierpont Morgan being one example, the inventor wanted desperately to succeed. His goal was not so much to line his own pockets, although surely he sought to get rich from the invention, but rather to help society. Tesla was well aware of his potential role in reshaping the course of human events. Seeing no other choice, he brashly decided in early 1904 not to hide the Morgan connection anymore, but rather to publicize it and to maintain the front that everything was okay. To one of his worried investors, William Rankin of the Niagara Falls Project, he wrote on April the 10th, "Doubt the light of the sun, doubt the brightness of the stars, but do not doubt the existence of the Nikola Tesla Company." Landing Morgan in the first instance had been a feather in his cap. Now the bon vivant decided to exploit the connection, and also brazenly rebel against a man who seemed bent on sinking his ship. In quintessential Teslaic fashion, he published a spectacular article simultaneously in Scientific American and Electrical World and Engineer. In it he outlined his work to date and plans for the future, adorning the piece with breathtaking photographs of his transmission stations in Colorado Springs and Wardenclyffe. The results attained by me have made my scheme of world telegraphy easily realizable. It constitutes a radical and fruitful departure from what has been done heretofore. It involves the employment of a number of plants, each of which will be preferably located near some important center of civilization, and the news it receives through any channel will be flashed to all points of the globe. A cheap and simple pocket-sized device may then be set up somewhere on sea or land, and it will record the world news or such special messages as may be intended for it. Thus, the entire Earth will be converted into a huge brain, as it were, capable of response in every one of its parts. Since a single plant of but 100 horsepower can operate hundreds of millions of instruments, the system will have a virtually infinite working capacity. The first of these central plants would have been already completed had it not been for unforeseen delays which, fortunately, have nothing to do with its purely technical features. This delay may prove, after all, to be blessing in disguise. For the work done so far, I am indebted to the noble generosity of Mr. J. Pierpont Morgan, which was all the more welcome as it was extended at a time when those who have since promised most were the greatest of doubters. I have also to thank my friend Stanford White for much unselfish assistance. This work is now far advanced, and though the results may be tardy, they are sure to come. 35. Dissolution, 1904 to 1906. I have observed in the House of Morgan a largeness, nobility, and firmness of character, the like of which is very scarce indeed. I can only smile when I read of the attempts to find something discreditable in the transactions of J.P. Morgan and Company. Not 100 of such investigations will ever uncover anything which an unprejudiced judge would not consider honorable, fair, decent, and in every way conforming to the high ideals and ethical standards of business. I would be willing to stake my life on it. Nikola Tesla. Sociologist Karl Mannheim suggests that the psychohistorian should attempt to reconstruct both the subject's Weltanschauung and the spirit of the age in question. Irrational components should be recognized. Thus, and in this sense, history is paradoxical. It is contradictory, dynamic, multi-leveled, and dialectic. Tesla's worldview involved a philosophy based on the work of Wolfgang von Goethe. His inventions were for him not true creations in the sense that they stemmed from nothing. They evolved from the work of others and from uncovering secret mechanisms lying within hidden laws of nature. Was it God who wrote each sign, which, all my inner tumult stilling, and this poor heart with rapture filling, reveals to me by a force divine, great nature's energies around and through me thrilling? Am I a God? It grows so bright to me, each character on which my eye reposes, nature in act before my soul discloses. This idea can clearly be found in Goethe's Faust, Tesla's favorite poem, which he memorized in its entirety, and which he referred to throughout his life. It was Faust which he recited in Budapest during his salad days, when he uncovered the secret to the rotating magnetic field, and it was a Faustian paradigm to which he adhered when he linked the invention of the world telegraphy system to the discovery of the Holy Grail. There manifests itself in the fully developed being, man, a desire mysterious, inscrutable, and irresistible, to imitate nature, to create, to work himself the wonders he perceives. He subdues and puts to his service the fierce, devastating spark of Prometheus, the titanic forces of the waterfall, the wind, and the tide. He tames the thundering bolt of Jove and annihilates time and space. He makes the great sun itself his obedient, toiling slave. Can man control this grandest, most awe-inspiring of all processes in nature? Can he harness her inexhaustible energies to perform all their functions at his bidding? If he could do this, he would have powers almost unlimited and supernatural. This would be the supreme manifestation of the power of man's mind, his most complete triumph over the physical world, his crowning achievement, which would place him beside his Creator, make him fulfill his ultimate destiny. Nikola Tesla. Two major themes which run through Goethe's poem are that 1, secrets of nature can be revealed and harnessed to human needs, and that 2, humans are enticed by satanic forces. Clearly Tesla was driven by both tenets. In the second case, consciously or unconsciously, Morgan was sought out for the very reason that he was a demigod, a superhuman whose life transcended that of mere mortals. Just as Faust was tempted by Mephistopheles, Tesla was lured by the House of Morgan. In the financier's strong hands, Tesla willingly and, alas, irrationally, handed over the 51% control, insisting on it. Knowing that the contract involved relinquishing his cornucopia of past and future patent applications, the inventor still sealed the Faustian pact, as the terms were immaterial to him. Mephistopheles. Whatever promise on your books find entry, we strictly carry into act. For the present, I entreat most urgently your kind dismission. Faust. Do stay but just one moment longer, then. Tell me good news, and I'll release thee. Dear Mr. Morgan, since many years I have known one side of your character intimately. I believe that in my first approach to you, I have given you evidence of this knowledge. You have already put aside the money necessary to complete the work begun in your thoughts, and that is as good as done. But I did not understand you as a businessman until lately. I have worked for results, carrying with them a dignity and force such as to deserve your attention. What you wanted was a simple result. Will you let me profit by this later knowledge and give me an opportunity to rehabilitate myself in your opinion as a businessman? In October 1903, fully 2 months before Orville and Wilbur Wright made aviation history, Professor Samuel P. Langley launched a heavier-than-air ship from the roof of a houseboat situated on the Potomac. With photographers from the Smithsonian Institution present, the craft was slingshot over the 70-foot rails and in a moment was free upon air. Then it wavered. Down the aerodrome sank, with its daring navigator emerging from the disaster, suffering only a ducking. The press called Langley's airplane a failure, but Tesla rallied to Langley's defense. Langley has perceived a great truth, Tesla wrote in the New York Herald, namely, that a machine heavier than air could be made to fly. Such a man should be provided with the necessary means to complete his work. Great honor attaches to this achievement, and also great practical utility, which this country can ill afford to lose. Tesla started off 1904 on the offensive, with his manifesto and striking publications. Work on the wireless operation was suspended, and essential components were stripped from the tower and returned to disgruntled creditors. A skeleton crew kept up appearances and continued the development of his lamps and oscillators. But as his Wardenclyffe notes reveal, There was no theoretical writings during this period. All of Tesla's energies were concentrated in one avenue, raising the funds to resurrect the project. Tesla's attorneys had located a manufacturer in Connecticut to make all the metal parts of his oscillators, but there was still the problem of distribution, and the revenues would not enable him to reopen the Wardenclyffe plant. Another predicament had to do with Mr. Warden himself. Apparently he had not conducted a title search when he purchased the land, and a legal shadow had fallen on the property. Tesla used the entanglement to further delay payment of the mortgage. "One consideration," he wrote Sheriff, "is that the Edison-Pupin-Marconi combination, who have given me so much trouble, are in a worse fix." In February, Tesla attended a musical recital and party in Gramercy Park, hosted by Stanford White and his wife Bessie, for 350 of his friends, with dinner afterwards at Sherry's. Most likely the inventor crossed paths with Morgan, as well as other potential investors. The following month the inventor conferred with the CEO, Chief Executive Officer, of GE, Charles Coffin. "If the GE people refuse, they are simply snoozers," he wrote Sheriff. Nothing came of the meeting. But in April a solid lead came via John S. Barnes, a well-connected financier who had read Tesla's article in Electrical World and Engineer. An associate of Colonel Oliver Payne's from the Rockefeller clique, Barnes had invited Tesla to his home for dinner and to discuss the inventor's plans. "I have always had the highest regard for Colonel Payne, and would be happy indeed should he ever deem me worthy of his association. We are curious as to the details of the Commodore's bestowal," Barnes interjected. "Mr. Morgan has not made a generous donation, as you might have inferred from my article," Tesla craftily retorted. "He is a man with a great brain, and has seen that by forming a business partnership instead, he can make an extremely profitable investment." Although hesitant to make a commitment, Barnes nevertheless suggested that Tesla have his lawyers write up their evaluation of his patent applications. Because of his link to Colonel Payne, Tesla took the suggestion very seriously. A multimillionaire from the city of Cleveland, Payne had made his fortune as a partner of John D. Rockefeller. The duo had earned 50 cents per barrel for every barrel of oil that was shipped by rail. This enormous kickback had been set up as a rebate for their own crude, and as a tariff for every competitor. With their vast holdings and Rockefeller's ferret-like spirit, they had simply bullied the railroads into this contractual arrangement. Known as a haughty fellow and kin of God, Payne never did take to John D., but he did maintain the partnership. He had a residence in New York and was a friend and financial benefactor of Stanford White, whom he commissioned to purchase art for him while in Europe and design his nephew's mansion, Payne Whitney, in the city. White, who was in an awful fix, nearly $750,000 in debt, mainly from the Northern Pacific fiasco, informed Tesla that Payne had provided him with notable assistance to help ease his burden. White was also disheartened because his girlfriend, young Evelyn Nesbit, had now begun dating a deranged multimillionaire from Pittsburgh, Harry Thor. "I have heard stories from the Florodora girls that he whipped one of them in bed with a cat of nine tails." Ironically, White held no ill feelings for Morgan, even though the financier was directly responsible for the market crash. At the close of 1903, White and his wife Bessie joined the Commodore on the Corsair to watch the yacht races, and White's partner, Charles McKim, was still busily involved in constructing the Morgan Library. One wonders how Morgan might have felt when he boated up to Newport or Bar Harbor and looked to the eastern horizon and saw Tesla's mushroom-shaped behemoth. "Do you think he will ever reconsider?" the inventor inquired. "With Morgan, anything is possible," came the architect's reply. "However, I think at this stage Colonel Payne is a safer bet." A Yankee cornerstone, the good colonel was connected to the highest echelons in government. Through the marriage of his sister, he was linked to William C. Whitney, Secretary of the Navy, and also to John Hay, Secretary of State. Payne's father, Henry Payne, was a well-known senator, often discussed as a potential candidate for the President of the United States. This was not a lead to take lightly. As a favor to this Ohio nobleman, Tesla opened up his storehouse to the Cleveland leader and conferred with Kerr, Page, and Cooper for a way to create a legal document that would delineate the scope and fundamental might of his arsenal of patents. In a comprehensive article entitled Harnessing the Lightning, journalist Alfred Cowles noted that the inventor's prognostications were so startling that had they come from another source, one would naturally consider them the vagaries of a wandering mind. If he can accomplish what he is undertaking, his fame will, in future centuries, overshadow the greatest names of the past. Echoing sentiments Tesla had expressed during their interview, Cowles concluded, "Real inventions are only possible when the mental creation of the inventor proves to be in harmony with natural law, and such inventions, when they are necessities, are in themselves a part of the evolutionary process, where development is an adjustment to environment. How all one whole harmonious weaves, each in the other works and lives. I see heavenly powers ascending and descending, the golden buckets one long line extending." Tesla presented to Barnes and Payne a comprehensive lawyer's brief delineating essentially every feature of his master plan. Included were patent specifications and plans for distributing electrical energy without wires for telegraphic, telephonic, and industrial purposes, for storing the energy, localizing transmissions, ensuring non-interferability, and for creating separate channels. Also included was Tesla's work in teleautomatics, means for creating high frequencies, his oscillators, and a method for insulating electric mains by refrigeration to very low temperature. By this means, power can be conveyed to great distances cheaply and literally without any loss. The plan also suggested the perfect solution of the problem of underground distribution in cities and populated districts. Thus, the ultimate scheme would involve both wireless and conventional means of distributing the electrical energy. Analyzing the viability of each of the 23 patents, lawyers Kerr, Page and Cooper concluded, "We know of nothing to anticipate the claims, and are of the opinion that they are valid." The report was also circulated to other major players, including Fortune Ryan and Pierpont Morgan. "I swear," Tesla wrote to Scherf, "if I ever get out of this hole, nobody will catch me without cash." Simultaneously, he haggled with the coal company to maintain fuel deliveries and with the telephone company to keep his line at Wardenclyffe open. "I am now sure that the 2 lamps as proposed will be a perfect success, and you know that after that I can draw on the U.S. Treasury." Problems with the lamp persisted, however, and it would never be marketed under Tesla's name. October the 28th, 1958. Westinghouse announcement. Lamp Division. The Westinghouse Corporation is pleased to announce that a flat light bulb, which has no filaments, which produces no heat, which is glare-free, and which will burn night and day for a year for less than a penny, has been introduced. This marks the first time the public has been able to purchase an electroluminescent lamp as a light source for the home. As the Colonel Payne deal fell through, Tesla wrote to Morgan from Wardenclyffe, "I hope the unfortunate misunderstanding, the cause of which I have been vainly trying to discover, will be removed, and that you will recognize that my work is the kind that passes into history and worthy of your support." Throughout the spring and summer, Tesla would visit the plant again and again for strength and confirmation. In June, he instructed Scherf to make sure that the lawn was manicured at Wardenclyffe, as he was arriving with another potential investor. Yet his resolve was beginning to waver. Everywhere he turned, he met rejection. He became convinced that his success rested on changing the mind of a single man. In September, a dispatch was hand-delivered to Morgan, assuring contracts for several such plants in England and Russia. But no response came from the financier. During the height of autumn, Morgan conferred with the Archbishop of Canterbury. Taking this as a mystical sign in the aid of his quest, the engineering cognoscenti authored on October the 13th, his favorite day of the month, a 13-point letter spelling out the entire chain of events to the omnipotent capitalist. The letter began with a discussion of his patent applications, the development of their liaison, and Tesla's decision to change the nature of the agreement because of Marconi's piracy. Simply transmitting mere Morse-coded messages was beneath consideration for the pompous conceptualist. As he had aligned himself with the greatest economic force on the planet, this confirmed the necessity of engaging in the larger endeavour. Your participation called for a careful revision of my plans. Perhaps you have never fully appreciated the sense of this obligation. Once I lost your support, I could not, because of your personality and character of our agreement, interest anybody else, at least not for several years, until the commercial value of my patents was recognized. By increasing the size of the transmitter until the plant can transmit signals to the uttermost confines of the earth, its earning power becomes, so to speak, unlimited, but it will cost scarcely twice as much, e.g. $300,000. This offered possibilities for a business on a large, dignified scale, commensurate with your position in life and mine as pioneer in this art, who has originated all its essential principles. You had told me from the outset that I should not ask for more, but the work was of such transcending importance that I undertook to explain to you the state of things on your first return from abroad. You seem to misunderstand me. This was most unfortunate. The audacious schemers who have dared to fool the crowned heads of Europe, the President of the United States, and even His Holiness the Pope, have discredited the art by incompetent attempts, far more than they ever could by success, and spoiled the public by false promises which it cannot distinguish from legitimate right and skill. Now, I know you must be skeptical about getting hundredfold returns, but if you will help me to the end, you will soon see that my judgment is true. I have expended about $250,000 in all, and a much smaller sum separates me from a giant triumph. $75,000 would certainly complete the plant. This letter, greatly condensed here, was a fair and accurate assessment of what had occurred and why. Clearly it was written by a lucid savant, one who had proved himself in industry on many other occasions, and one who was on the verge of altering the course of civilization in a dramatic and revolutionary way. Tesla was operating at the level of soul consciousness, and so he removed all defences and revealed the very depths of his being with the following salutation and sacred vow. Since a year, Mr. Morgan, there has been hardly a night when my pillow is not bathed in tears. But you must not think me a weak man for that. I am perfectly sure to finish my task, come what may. I am only sorry that after mastering all the difficulties which seemed insuperable, and acquiring a special knowledge and ability which I now alone possess, and which, if applied effectively, would advance the world a century, I must see my work delayed. In hope of hearing from you favourably, I remain N. Tesla. October 15th, 1904. Dear Sir, referring to your letter of the 13th of October, Mr. J.P. Morgan wishes me to inform you that it will be impossible for him to do anything more in the matter. This cavalier dismissal tore the inventor apart, and opened up a tendril that bared not only his wrath against the force that had blocked his crusade, but also a poetic eloquence. October 17th, 1904. Dear Mr. Morgan, you are a man like Bismarck, great but uncontrollable. I wrote purposefully last week, hoping that your recent association with the Archbishop might have rendered you more susceptible to a softer influence. But you are no Christian at all. You are a fanatic Mussulman. Once you say no, come what may, it is no. May the gravitation repel instead of attract? May right become wrong? Every consideration, no matter what it may be, must founder on the rock of your brutal resolve. It is incredible. A year and a half ago I could have delivered a lecture here which would have been listened to by all of the academicians of the world. That would have been the time to thank you. But you let me struggle on, weakened by shrewd enemies, disheartened by doubting friends, financially exhausted, trying to overcome obstacles which you yourself have piled up before me. If this is a good thing, why does not Morgan see you through? Morgan is the very last man to let a good thing go. So it has been going on for 2 years. I advance, but how? like a man swimming against a stream that carries him down. Will you not listen to anything at all? Are you to let me perhaps succumb, lose an immortal crown? Will you let a property of immense value be depreciated? Let it be said that your own judgment was defective, simply because you once said no? Can now I make you a new proposition to overcome the difficulty? I tell you, I shall return your money 100-fold. The letter was followed up with testimonials to his abilities as espoused by various leaders in his field. It also explained in detail how this operation advanced the work performed at Colorado Springs. On December the 16th, Tesla sent an ultimatum. He requested either $100,000 to complete the plant or $50,000 to finish the indispensable parts, make everything perfectly fireproof, and take out insurance. Or, if you do not want this, only one thing remains. You release me of all obligations, give me back my assignments, and consider the sum you have invested as a generous contribution, leaving it all to my integrity and ability to work out the best results for you and for myself. Tesla suggested that he could go on a lecture tour to raise the funds. Then it would take him not more than a week to get a few million in Wall Street. On the 17th, Morgan wrote back, I am not willing to advance you any more money, as I have frequently told you. As to your third proposition, I am not prepared to accept this either. I have made and carried out with you in good faith a contract, and having performed my part, it is not unreasonable that I expect you to carry out yours. December 19th, 1904. Dear Mr. Morgan, owing to a habit contracted long ago in defiance of superstition, I prefer to make important communications on Fridays and the 13th of each month. But my house is afire, and I have not an hour to waste. I knew that you would refuse. What chance have I to land the biggest Wall Street monster with the soul's spicier thread? You say that you have fulfilled your contract with me. You have not. I came to enlist your genius and power, not because of money. You should know that I have honored you in so doing as much as I have honored myself. You are a big man, but your work is wrought in passing form. Mine is immortal. I came to you with the greatest invention of all times. I have more creations named after me than any man that has gone before, not excepting Archimedes and Galileo, the giants of invention. $6,000 million are invested in enterprises based on my discoveries in the United States today. This is not a boast, Mr. Morgan. Only my credentials. I could draw on you at sight for $1 million if you were the Pierpont Morgan of old. At this point, Tesla refers to what he perceives as Morgan's breach of contract. When we entered our contract, I furnished 1. Patent rights, 2. My ability as an engineer and electrician, 3. My goodwill. You were to furnish 1. Money, 2. Your business ability, 3. Your goodwill. I assigned patent rights, which in the worst case are worth 10 times your cash investment. You advanced the money, true, but even this first clause of our contract was violated. There was a delay of 2 months in furnishing the last $50,000, a delay which was fatal. I complied conscientiously with the second and third obligations. You ignored yours deliberately. Not only this, but you discredited me. There is only one way to go, Mr. Morgan. Give me the money to finish a great work, or else make me a present and let me work out my salvation. Your interest is sacred to me, and my hearty wishes for your happiness and welfare will always be with you. Faithfully yours, N. Tesla. To demonstrate goodwill, Tesla enclosed a royalty check on one of his patents and an advance copy of his theoretical masterpiece, the transmission of electrical energy without wires as a means of furthering peace. A fortnight later, on January the 6th, 1905, Morgan sent the 49% balance legally due the inventor. The Wardenclyffe Peace Plan. Published in Electrical World and Engineer, Tesla's treatise ran nearly 6,000 words. It began with a discussion of how philanthropy and the practical utilization of electrical vibrations, that is, a mass communication system, might bring about universal peace. In defining and analyzing this theme, Tesla noted that it may come about suddenly as the result of a slow accumulation of past efforts through history. We must think cosmically. The race enmities and prejudices are decidedly waning. So far, however, universal harmony has been attained only in a single sphere of international relationship, that is, the postal service. A few strong countries might scare all the weaker ones into peace, Tesla suggests, but to conquer by sheer force is becoming harder and harder every day. Just as cruise missiles, CNN, and the world news organizations have altered markedly the way war is conducted today by having machines